Welcome to another deep dive. We've had a ton of requests to tackle the mystery of crystal skulls.
Yeah, seems like everyone's got questions about these things.
Is there really a skull of doom with like supernatural powers?
And what about that whole legend of the 13 crystal skulls holding universal knowledge?
That's what we're here to figure out. We've got a mountain of research to dig through.
Let's separate fact from fiction and see what's really going on with these crystal skulls.
So to start, this whole legend of 13 crystal skulls, it's actually pretty new, right?
Yeah, it really gained traction in the mid-20th century. The story goes that these skulls...
Oh, well, hold on. The story. So it's not like historical fact.
Well, the story claims that these skulls were made by beings,
Aliens.
Yeah, basically. They were supposedly given to the Atlanteans and then passed down through, like, Mayan and Aztec civilizations.
Okay, see, that's what I'm talking about. It's like straight out of an Indiana Jones movie.
Right. And then there's this idea that if all 13 skulls are united, they'll reveal, universal mysteries.
Like in 2012, with the whole Mayan calendar thing.
Exactly. But let's not forget the people who claim to have had these crazy experiences with the skulls.
Visions, healing energy, even talking to spirits through them.
Yeah, all that. One of the big names in the crystal skull world is this woman, Carol Wilson. She used a skull called the Skull of Doom in her seances.
Seances, like talking to the dead.
Yep. She basically believed this skull was like a pre-programmed computer that could answer questions.
Through touch. Like you touch the skull and it tells you stuff.
That was the idea. So this whole concept of crystal skulls being vessels for ancient knowledge or alien tech, it really took off.
And even big companies got involved. Didn't Hewlett-Packard analyze the Skull of Doom back in the 70s?
They did, and their findings actually fueled the fire. They discovered that the Skull of Doom has these piezoelectric properties.
Piezo what?
Piezoelectric. It means it can generate an electric charge when you put pressure on it.
So like a crystal battery.
Kind of. That's why people thought it could store information or energy. It seemed to back up the whole ancient secrets idea.
Speaking of secrets, we got to talk about the guy who supposedly found this Skull of Doom, Frederick Mitchell-Hedges. Total adventurer, treasure hunter, maybe even a spy.
Yeah, real-life Indiana Jones vibes.
He spent years exploring Central America, digging up Mayan ruins, collecting all sorts of stuff.
He was a colorful character, that's for sure. Loved a good story, too.
And his story about the Skull of Doom? Classic. He said he found it in the 1920s while exploring these ruins in Belize at a point called Lubantun.
A Mayan city. But here's the thing, he kept it secret for years.
Why?
Maybe obligations to his financial backers, who knows? But that secrecy just added to the whole mystique.
It's like the less you know, the more you want to know.
Exactly. But then things get even more interesting when his adopted daughter, Anna Mitchell-Hedges, enters the picture.
Okay, so after Frederick dies, Anna takes over the crystal skull spotlight.
Right. She claims she found the skull herself when she was like 17.
Wait, but her dad said he found it.
That's where the story gets a little fuzzy. Anna said she found it hidden in a secret chamber under a Mayan temple.
Guarded by poisonous snakes?
Of course. Gotta have some danger, right?
Yeah, it's like a movie.
She really knew how to tell a good story, and she totally believed in the skull's mystical powers. She went on TV, wrote a book.
The skull was like her claim to fame, but not everyone bought it.
Nope. Some researchers started poking holes in the whole crystal skull thing.
Like, were any of these skulls actually ancient?
That's what they wanted to find out. One skeptic was Jane Walsh, an anthropologist at the Smithsonian.
The Smithsonian, they've got their own crystal skull, don't they?
They do, but we'll get to that. Jane teamed up with Margaret Sachs, a scientist at the British Museum.
Okay, so they're like the crystal skull detectives.
Pretty much. They started looking into several famous skulls, including the ones in the London and Paris museums.
Yeah.
And those skulls, thought to be Aztec, showed signs of being carved with modern tools.
Like tools that didn't exist back then.
Exactly. Specifically rotary wheels. Those weren't around until the 19th century.
So fake Aztec skulls. Made centuries after the Aztecs were gone.
Seems like it. Plus, the type of crystal used. It came from Madagascar and Brazil, not Central America.
So someone was making these skulls in Europe and selling them as the real deal.
Likely. There was even a French antiquities dealer, Eugene Bobon, who was known for this kind of thing.
Wow, so even the big museums got tricked. But what about the Smithsonian skull?
Good question. They got theirs as an anonymous donation in the 1960s. It came with a note saying it was bought in Mexico City in 1960.
Sounds legit.
Except when they took a closer look. Same story. Modern tool marks.
No way. Even the Smithsonian got fooled. This is wild.
That gets wilder.
Yeah.
Jane Walsh was digging through old journals and found a 1936 article in a British journal called Man.
Man, like, what kind of articles were in that?
All sorts of stuff. But this one had a photo of a crystal skull. They called it the Burney skull because it belonged to an art dealer, Sidney Burney.
I'd date for it.
And it was the skull of doom.
Seriously, there's a picture of the skull of doom from before Anna Mitchell-Hedges said she found it.
Yep. And to make matters worse, Sotheby's auction records show that Frederick Mitchell-Hedges himself bought that same Burney skull in 1943.
Hold up, he bought it, so it wasn't in some Mayan temple at all.
Looks like it. Almost 20 years after Anna's supposed discovery, too. Pretty big inconsistency, right?
Massive. This whole thing is falling apart.
When you look at Anna's story, there are conflicting dates, no one else to back her up, and now this auction thing.
It all points to a big ol' fake.
Seems that way. But even with all this, there was still one more thing to do. Examine the skull of doom itself.
Really get up close and personal with it.
Yep, and Bill Holman, Anna's partner, and the guy who had the skull after she died, he actually agreed to have it analyzed at the Smithsonian.
Wow, he was okay with that, even though he believed in the skull's powers and all that.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising. They used these powerful electron microscopes to look for any signs of modern tool marks.
What'd they find?
What they found was pretty much the final nail in the coffin. Modern tool marks, clear as day.
So the skull of doom was confirmed to be made in the 20th century.
Exactly, not ancient at all. But Bill Holman, even with all this evidence, still clung to his belief in the skull. He said the tool marks must have been made with super advanced technology.
Alien tech. Atlantean tools.
Something like that. He just couldn't let go of the legend completely.
I guess some stories are just too good to give up on, even when the facts say otherwise. But what about Jane Walsh? What's her take on why Anna made up this whole thing?
Well, she thinks maybe Anna did it for money at first. Maybe to avoid taxes or make the skull more valuable.
Makes sense. A mysterious artifact is worth a lot more than a regular old skull.
Right. And Jane Walsh thinks that over time, maybe Anna started believing her own story. The lines between truth and fiction got blurred.
Wow, that's kind of sad, actually. But even if these skulls aren't ancient, someone still made them, and that takes a lot of skill.
Absolutely. To carve something so intricate from a single piece of quartz, even with modern tools, is amazing.
It makes you wonder, why go through all that trouble? Was it just for money? Or was there something more to it? Like, were they trying to tap into this whole fascination with the mystical and the unknown?
It's a good question. We might never know for sure, but we've definitely busted the myth that these famous crystal skulls are ancient relics.
True. But there's still so much to unpack here. Like, why do people believe in things like this, even when there's evidence against it?
And what about the whole 13 skulls prophecy? Is there anything to that?
Plus, are there any crystal skulls out there that haven't been debunked? So many questions. Guess we'll need to keep digging.
We'll dive deeper into all of that right after the break. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've learned that the Spell of Doom, despite the amazing story, isn't actually an ancient artifact.
But it's pretty amazing how that myth stuck around for so long. Even scientists and big institutions got caught up in it.
Right, it just shows how a good story can really grab people's attention. But hey, even if these crystal skulls aren't from some lost civilization or a doorway to another dimension...
They still have this pull, right?
Exactly. People are still drawn to them, looking for connection, meaning maybe a little bit of magic.
Yeah, you've got this whole subculture dedicated to crystal skulls. People claiming they experience all sorts of things.
Heightened intuition, physical healing, all that.
That's what they say.
You know what really sticks in my mind? That episode of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, where Anna Mitchell-Hedges talked about the skull sweating before global disasters.
Oh yeah, that episode. That really pushed the whole crystal skull legend into the mainstream.
It was right there with all these other unexplained phenomena, really blurred the lines between fact and fiction.
For sure. And think about when all this was happening, the 70s and 80s.
New Age spirituality was huge back then.
Exactly. Alternative beliefs, ancient mysteries. It was the perfect time for the crystal skull legend to take off.
People were searching for different ways to understand the world, looking beyond the usual explanations.
And those crystal skulls, with their mysterious origins and supposed powers, they fit right in.
But even if we forget about all the supernatural stuff, the craftsmanship of those skulls is incredible.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about it. To carve something that detailed from a solid chunk of quartz, even with modern tools, that's impressive.
It really is.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about the people who made them. Were they just trying to make money off this fascination with exotic artifacts?
Or were they inspired by something deeper, something artistic or spiritual?
It's a good question. And it leads us to this whole fascinating area, the psychology of belief.
Why are we so drawn to mysteries, legends, things we can't explain?
Is it a way to make sense of the world, to find meaning when things feel uncertain, or maybe it's about connecting to something bigger than ourselves?
These are questions people have been asking forever. Philosophers, psychologists, everyone.
And these crystal skulls are a perfect example. Even after we know the truth about their origins, people are still fascinated by them.
It shows how much we crave those stories that spark our imagination, challenge what we think we know, and offer a sense of wonder.
Right. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves, even if they're not completely true, reveal something deeper about us, about our hopes and fears, our search for meaning.
You know, you're absolutely right. It's not really about the crystal skulls themselves, is it?
It's about the power we give them through our beliefs, our imagination, our desire to connect with something beyond the everyday.
So yeah, science has shown us that these particular skulls aren't ancient, but they still hold a certain power.
Not as magical objects or prophecies, but as reflections of our own human need for wonder and connection with the unknown.
And that in itself is pretty amazing.
It is. And it reminds us that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we create ourselves. But of course, there's still more to uncover.
Right. What about all those other crystal skulls out there? Are any of them the real deal? And that whole 13 skulls prophecy, where did that come from?
Well, there are plenty of crystal skulls in museums and private collections, but none have been proven to be truly ancient.
So it's like the legend keeps evolving, mixing in pop culture, new age ideas, even Hollywood.
Exactly. It's as if the skulls themselves are blank slates.
And we just project our own hopes and fears onto them. Maybe that's why they're still so fascinating.
They bring together history, mystery, and the power of our imagination.
It makes you think. If these skulls hadn't been debunked, would we be as interested in them?
Or is it the whole process of questioning, of digging for the truth, that makes them even more captivating?
Maybe it's the journey itself that matters. We're trying to solve this puzzle, separate fact from fiction, and even if the truth isn't as fantastical as we hoped, the process of discovering it can be pretty awesome.
Totally. It shows that even in a world where science and tech are everything, there's still room for mystery and exploration.
We need that sense of wonder, that drive to learn and discover things beyond just the facts.
Absolutely. We need both science, AD imagination, critical thinking, and a sense of wonder. That's how we really understand the world and our place in it.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've gone from the legends to the evidence, uncovered a story that's about so much more than just crystal skulls.
It's been a real pleasure exploring all this with you.
And to our listener, we want you to keep thinking about the stories we tell ourselves and the world around us.
Don't be afraid to question things, explore different ideas, and never lose that sense of wonder.
The search for knowledge is an adventure, and there are always more mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Until next time.
You know, it's strange when you think about it. A crystal skull just sits there, doesn't do anything. But it causes all this debate and intrigue.
Like people build entire belief systems around them. It says a lot about us, doesn't it?
I guess so. The need for stories, the search for meaning, even if it means seeing things that aren't really there.
We're drawn to the mystery, the beauty, the idea of something ancient and powerful.
Like we want to connect to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. It's a very human thing, I think, to look for that connection, especially when faced with the unknown.
And it's not just crystal skulls. We do this with all sorts of legends and artifacts.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Think about King Arthur, the Holy Grail, the lost city of Atlantis. Those stories have been around for centuries, and people still believe in them, even though there's no real proof.
Because they speak to something deep within us.
Yeah.
They reflect our hopes, our fears, our longing for something beyond the everyday.
They offer a sense of history, a connection to the past, and maybe even a glimpse of something truly magical.
A world where anything is possible.
It makes you wonder, though, if the famous crystal skulls hadn't been debunked, would we still be so fascinated by them?
That's an interesting thought. Is it the mystery itself that draws us in? Or is it the process of unraveling that mystery?
Maybe it's both. Maybe we're drawn to the unknown, but we also crave the satisfaction of figuring things out.
Like solving a puzzle. You start with these fragments of information, a story, a legend, and then you piece it together.
You examine the evidence, you challenge assumptions, and sometimes you discover that the truth is even more amazing than the myth.
Or sometimes you find out it was all a hoax.
Right. But even then, the journey itself is worthwhile. We've learned something along the way.
We've honed our critical thinking skills. We've questioned our assumptions. And maybe we've even discovered something about ourselves in the process.
It shows that there's always more to learn, that the pursuit of knowledge is an adventure, and that even in a world driven by science and technology, there's still room for mystery and exploration.
I think that's what makes this whole deep dive into crystal skulls so fascinating. It's not just about the objects themselves, it's about what they represent.
The power of belief, the allure of the unknown, the human need to make sense of the world around us.
And the enduring power of stories.
We've come a long way on this deep dive. We started with legends and ended up exploring the very nature of belief and the human quest for meaning.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And to our listeners out there, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never lose your sense of wonder.
The world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered.
So keep that curiosity alive. And who knows what incredible discoveries you might make along the way.